Hey guys, I'm Sasha from 407apartments.com and I'm also this year's AAGO Education Chair. I'd like to invite all of you guys out to Lisa Palooza, an event that's being held on September 27th at the Plaza Live on Bumby Avenue in downtown Orlando.
A popular, young, and successful rental real estate agent who graduated from the University of Florida is found dead in her apartment with no signs of forced entry. She had abrasions to her upper and lower body, along with signs of blunt force trauma to her head. But nobody could have thought of someone who would have wanted to harm her. The Orlando, Florida apartment complex she lived in was overseen by armed security along with monitored security cameras throughout the premises. But nothing immediately showed an intruder or alluded to just how twisted the acts that led to her death really were. If you're here for the first time, please subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell beside it, so you get notifications whenever I upload new content. And if you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Please don't forget to drop a like on the video as it helps the channel out immensely and allows me to bring you more of this content in the future. In today's video, we'll be talking about the case of Sasha Samsudean, who was murdered on October 17, 2015, after enjoying a night out with her friends in Orlando, Florida. Sasha was 27 years old at the time of her murder, and she enjoyed her career as a social media manager at 407 Apartments, where she helped bring awareness to different promotions the complex ran, the benefits of living there, and showing the property to prospective renters. Her friends and coworkers said she was great at her job, and she had a passion for helping others in general. She did not begin her career as a social media manager, though she worked her way up to that position. Initially, she was a part-time employee, but her performance allowed her to move up quickly and secure more responsibilities along the way. With her promotion, she of course enjoyed a higher salary, which allowed her to move into Uptown Apartments. This was an upscale complex with beautiful views, stunning floor plans, and was in a sought-after area in downtown Orlando. She also had a thriving personal life. She had many friends, she was active on social media, and she had a large family that she was close with as well. Like most successful young women around her age in the area, she enjoyed visiting the local clubs, dancing, and hanging out with her friends and family when she wasn't working. One of her favorite sports to watch was soccer, and on October 16th, she attended an Orlando City soccer game with a few friends. After their team won, they wanted to celebrate, so Sasha and her friends decided to go to a nearby club for drinks and dancing. This was a nightclub that they attended regularly, so they were familiar with many of the people inside working and some of the other patrons that weren't with their group as well. They partied and had drinks for a while. Then Sasha decided she wanted to leave. Her friends didn't think anything was wrong because she had done this before in the past. As a couple of her friends said, sometimes they would go to multiple clubs and bars in one night, so they did not think anything was wrong. Camera footage from that night captured Sasha leaving the club at around 12:30 wearing white pants and a purple shirt, which matched the colors of the Orlando City Soccer Club that she supported earlier that night. Where concern started to set in was on the following day when she did not show up to breakfast she had scheduled with one of her friends, and then throughout the day when nobody could get a hold of her. Several members of her family and multiple friends reached out to her, but got no response. As I mentioned, she was supposed to meet up with her friend Anthony for breakfast that morning, but did not make it or call to cancel. He initially didn't panic as he was a part of the celebration the night before and figured she may have simply overslept or been hungover from the drinks. After calling multiple times and sending text messages to check on her, Anthony said he would wait a couple of hours before he let it worry him that she hadn't responded. At this point, he still thought it was possible that she was asleep and hadn't seen his messages. He also took a look at her social media accounts to see if she had posted or otherwise been active, but found no signs that she had touched her phone at all. This caused him to reach out to their group of friends and see if anyone else had been able to get through to her, which nobody had. Panic started to set in, and Anthony decided to ask a couple of their mutual friends to go over to her apartment to see if they could get to her. They agreed and made their way to Uptown Apartments at around 5:30 that evening. When they entered the parking lot, they saw her car there, and this added some relief, but they still wanted to make sure that she was okay. The group knew that Sasha was supposed to attend a baby shower that day, so when they walked up to her car and saw there were still gifts inside, they knew she hadn't made it there either. This caused more feelings of concern for her safety because this was not an event she would miss. As a result, they decided to go up to her apartment and knock to see if that would wake her up or get some type of response out of her. But doing this didn't change anything. Anthony knocked on her door several times and waited for a while, but she did not come to the door, nor did she call or text them to let them know she was fine. Casual knocks turned into harder bangs as fears of the worst started to set in. After several minutes, the group decided that it was time to escalate this and report her missing to the police. Anthony was the friend who called the police and spoke to the operator. He told them about the night before and the fact that nobody had been able to reach her since. The operator asked about her mental state and whether or not he believed she was suicidal, and he stated no. He did not believe she had any thoughts about harming herself and that she was fine the last time he saw her. Minutes later, multiple officers arrived at her apartment to complete a wellness check based on the report. When they got there, they could not access her apartment immediately as it required a keycard, which none of the friends had. As a result, they sought out the manager, and he assisted them with entering her apartment, which showed no signs of foul play at first sight. They called her name at first, then looked in the kitchen and living room areas, with no signs of Sasha. The officers made their way down the hallway of her bedroom, where they initially saw one of her arms hanging off the end of her bed. When they made their way deeper into the room, they were able to see her hair hanging down from the bed, and the rest of her body was covered by a blanket. She was unresponsive, and there were visible signs of abuse on her body that alluded to the fact she was deceased. The officers checked for her vitals on the scene and confirmed that she was dead. Investigators immediately began to question her friends, family members, and neighbors in an attempt to get leads that would provide insight into who could have possibly wanted to harm her. Being that she had marks around her neck that looked like she was choked, and she was partially clothed, the police believed it could have been a crime of passion, especially since there were no signs of forced entry to her apartment. Further investigation at the scene uncovered that the keys to her vehicle, wallet, and cell phone were not inside. Whoever killed her most likely had these items or knew what happened to them. Investigators continued to look for clues at the scene, and they found the condom wrapper near her bed, the toilet seat up in her bathroom, and the smell of bleach radiating throughout the apartment. The toilet seat being up was particularly odd because she lived alone and would not have left it up for herself. Later, it would be found out that the murderer used bleach throughout the apartment to cover their tracks, but left behind shoe prints and a thumbprint on her toilet seat as well. The investigators spoke with the building manager again regarding the security footage and the specifics of how residents gain entrance to the building. They were informed that the footage is kept at a different location and it would take some time to get it, but that it would certainly be made available. They also provided that the premises is manned by security 24 hours a day, so they would provide information about the guards who worked that night. At this time, they had no leads regarding anyone that Sasha left the club with or any individuals that she was supposed to meet up with at her house that night. To explore all options, the investigators asked her friends and family if they were aware of her dating anyone or being in a relationship. Nobody was able to come up with an individual who was not covered by an alibi that made it impossible for them to have been at the scene on the night she was murdered. Days later, the autopsy report confirmed that Sasha was both raped and strangled to death on October 17, 2015. A male's DNA was also found on her body, giving them hope to catch her murderer while they were still awaiting the security footage. The footage came, and it provided a few answers and a lot more questions. At 1:46 that morning, she was seen entering the building alone, but a man was close behind her. He asked if she was okay, to which she said yes and continued up the stairs. The man did not follow her, as the footage from the stairwell showed her being alone, but the connecting camera that showed where she should have come out of the stairwell did not capture her for several minutes. It is not known if she began to feel sick and sat on a set of stairs for a while out of the picture or if something else happened. But for about 20 minutes, she seemingly disappeared. The next time she appears, she is running up the stairs, seemingly panicking. What happens afterward gives the investigators an angle that they weren't necessarily looking at before. One of the security guards is seen walking up the stairs behind her only seconds later. From their interview of the guard, he outlined that the night she was murdered, he remembered Sasha because he could not let her into the building without her keycard or an ID to show she lived there. It seems after the club, Sasha was intoxicated to the point that she could not remember her security code or where her ID was. This being the case, the guard would not let her in. The guard, Stephen Duxbury, stated that he tried to help Sasha by walking with her to get her key fob and trying to get her to remember the access code to her building. However, he said she ultimately went in after another resident, and that was the last he saw of her. The investigators continued to question others and look at the evidence to determine their next steps. In the process, they uncovered that her phone was connected to her iPad, which was in their custody. A look at her messages displayed that she texted someone named Ben at 5:12 the morning she was murdered. The text simply said Ben and nothing else, which caused him to become a person of interest as her last known contact. He was interviewed and volunteered to provide DNA, which did not match the DNA found on Sasha's body. His alibi also checked out. There was no footage of him being in the building on the night she was murdered. The man seen asking her if she was okay was also interviewed and agreed to provide a DNA swab. It turns out that he saw her state and was concerned about her well-being. He was able to account for where he spent the rest of the night, and his DNA did not match either. By this time, the news of her murder was public, and there was an award for information that led to the arrest of her killer. 2 women came forward stating that they saw Sasha leaving the club the night she was murdered and asked her to get into an Uber with them. They provided that there were men in a vehicle trying to get her attention, and that they felt concerned for her safety seeing how drunk she was. They said she recognized her apartment building while riding in the vehicle, and that once she went in, they assumed she would be fine. This information turned out to be credible, and the women were not seen as persons of interest in the crime. Given that all other leads turned out to be dead ends, the investigators determined that they needed to look at Stephen Duxbury a little closer, as he was the only individual seen walking with her in the building who hadn't provided a DNA sample. Duxbury was interviewed and agreed to provide a DNA sample. Investigators noted that he had abrasions on his arms that looked like bite marks, which raised more suspicion and prompted them to ask if he consented to a polygraph test. He agreed to take the test, and he showed deception in multiple areas when questioned about entering Sasha's apartment and knowing how she was killed. Multiple inconsistencies in his story caused the investigators to look at the footage again to see if they could poke more holes in his story. One thing that stood out was the fact that he said he left work at 6 o'clock that morning, but he could be seen in footage carrying garbage bags out at around 6:30. When the building managers were questioned about this, they said it was out of the norm for him to take the garbage out at all. Shortly after gathering this information, the DNA samples came back confirming a match with what was found on Sasha's body and the fingerprint found in her bathroom. Detectives were able to get his phone and take a look at his internet browser history, which uncovered some troubling information. It showed that he had researched ways to pick a lock just like the one on Sasha's door soon before her death. With all of the evidence pointing to Duxbury as the murderer, he was taken into custody on October 30th, 2015. He was charged with first-degree murder, attempted sexual battery, and burglary. A look into his past uncovered that Duxbury had a criminal past and even had complaints made against him by other residents that were seemingly ignored. As this information came out, Sasha's parents blamed the security company that hired him and filed the lawsuit against them as well. The security company, Vital Security, stated that he passed the required background tests, and they did their part in screening him for employment. In November of 2017, Duxbury was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in jail without the possibility of parole. He later tried to argue that he agreed to be interviewed by the police and to cooperate out of fear that he would be fired. This did not sway the jury or the judge, as the evidence that he committed the murder was overwhelming. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this case in the comments section. Was this just simply a case of a man who saw a drunk woman and decided to take advantage of her? Or was his criminal past something that should have kept him from being hired as a security guard altogether? There was a lawsuit filed against Kwikset about the lock and how easily it was manipulated. But being that Sasha's lock was discarded after she was killed, the manufacturer argued that her case was the result of a malfunction. Please don't forget to like this video and share it with the people you know who may enjoy this content as well. It helps the channel grow and allows me to create this content for you in the future. Catch you in the next video.